Well, I think that they turned my mic off because the next one's kind of interesting. We're going to be talking a little bit about player compensation, and clearly, I want to know the numbers.
Yeah, I really want to know the numbers. Player compensation, the great correction, question mark. This is definitely something that's going to be talked about during this so-called esports winter, and it's going to be a very interesting panel, so you'll be glad you sat your bum on a seat to listen to it. So, without further ado, we'd love to introduce you to your moderator and your panelists. So, leading this panel is the marvelous Trev Keane, the Group Commercial Director of EPIC Global. I heard Trev talking at the side of the stage. He has the most fabulous voice, and I'm rather jealous. Trev is going to be joined by Boban Totovski. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The General Secretary for the International Esports Federation. Just a quick reminder, the IESF, they are one of our silver partners, so we really couldn't do this event without them. We also have Josh Kingett, who is the head of esports at DotX Talent. And last but not least, Anna Baumann, who is the Executive Vice President of Esports at Infinite Reality and Koi. So guys, please give them a massive hand as they reveal player compensation figures, I hope. I want the juicy gossip, Trev. Come on.
Numbers.
Give it to me.
Specifics.
Give it to me.
Give it to us. You forgot.
Oh
one more.
Okay. This is a running
we're
theme.
just baiting you right now,
I am so sorry. I am booked for tomorrow, but if I don't turn up, you'll know exactly why. As we welcome, I am so sorry, Joe Fitzgibbon, who is a senior associate at Shepherd and Wedderburn. Did I say that right? Oh, amazing. Thank you. He's a lawyer. He's not boring. He's wonderful. And he's going to keep you all in check.
He'll sue you if you forget him. And here is a mic for you.
Right, great stuff. Great to be back at ESI, and you definitely know it's October when you see Ollie Ring walking around, so really good. So look, this is a panel that I'm really looking forward to, actually. I think we're going to have a good chat here. So at the moment, right, we're either in the esports winter, the great correction, the reset, you know, whatever way you want to look at it, but at the same time we're seeing sold out venues for tournaments. You know, we're seeing some fantastic sponsors coming into the space, you know, and we're seeing brilliant, you know, increasing attendances. So it's a bit of a paradox, you know, in the world at the moment. But if we're looking for something to, you know, to point the finger at, I guess, in some of the struggles with esports, salaries comes up. Unfortunately for me, or fortunately for me, we don't talk about executive salaries today, which is great. We're talking about player salaries. And yeah, I suppose the question we're going to ask is, are they out of control? You know, are they hampering orgs? And thankfully, I don't have to answer any of that because we've got, as of a few minutes ago, 4 great panelists that will join. So I guess before we get into the weeds, let's let everybody introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Boban. Quick 30 seconds on who you are.
Hello. Well, as I was introduced, Boban Totovski, General Secretary of the International Esports Federation. It's already 15 years. In a month, it's our 15th birthday of the existence of the federation. We have 140 member national federations throughout the world, making IESF one of the largest esports organizations in the world. And we represent athletes, players, and delegates. And on our competitions, they're actually playing not as teams, not as clubs, not for salaries, but for their country and for their flag.
Hello, my name is Josh Kingett, currently head of esports for DotX Talent, which means I represent mainly the professional players and coaches for the agency, less so on the commercial and casters and broadcast talent. Prior to this role, I was the founder and CEO of my own esports org, predominantly a League of Legends based org called X7 Esports, and we were most known for brokering Korean talent from the LCK League franchise, and then selling them on to LEC teams such as Team Vitality and Mad Lions last year.
Hi, my name is Anna Baumann. I'm the EVP Esports of Koi, whose parent company is Infinite Reality. I'm here to represent the team side with Koi. We're present almost across all Tier 1 esports with an LEC team, a VCT team, and a CDL team. And of course, I look forward to discussing player salaries and how to get them under control.
My name is Joe Fitzgibbon. I'm a lawyer, commercial contracts lawyer by trade, but I've come to this from the angle of video games I've done a lot of work in the video game sector. I've done a lot in the traditional sports sector. And as part of this panel, hopefully going to offer a little bit of an opinion from the outside looking in at what we look at when we look at esports teams, how we think about value from an external perspective.
Brilliant. Let's jump in. So, Anna, I'm going to start with you. I mean, you know, what do you contribute to the rise in esports salaries and the current state of play in the marketplace? And do you think a correction is needed?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I've had trouble hearing it.
Here we go.
Apologies.
How do you perceive the current state of play of player compensation in esports, and what factors have contributed to their rise?
So I think from a team's perspective, we're quite in a dilemma because obviously the best players are the ones who drive our competitive success. It's a strong and I think right belief across teams that if you are competitively successful, you can commercialize upon that, you know, the additional reach, the way you establish your brand. So it is quite tempting to just enter into a race to the top when it comes to signing the very best players. At the same time, you're operating in a highly intransparent market, and I think it's just deeply tempting to try to buy your way to success. Of course, you know, there are other models out there in terms of like nurturing talent very early on, building a sustainable model. However, I think, you know, this really is the contributing factor. Of course, then we also carry a bit of like a historical burden here. I think how player salaries are paid out, in particular when it comes to bonus payments, what impact prize money has. From early stages on, I think it is quite normal to pay out a high percentage of prize money and other revenue sources when the salary itself, the base salary, was rather low. However, we've entered a stage now where base salaries have risen into significant regions, you know, above 500,000 a year, where, you know, you could also start discussing whether it actually makes sense to have a player take part in all those revenue sources out there.
Yeah, and I suppose, Boban, to bring you in. Okay, good question. I mean, you're looking at it purely, you know, from a grassroots level, representing your country, coming in. I mean, you know, what is the impact associated with these high salaries? Does it, you know, does it create a ceiling or aspirational ceiling for kind of players to reach to? Is it a goal, or does it damage the ecosystem in a way?
Well, from one aspect, it may be, it's not damaging, it's costing a lot, the ecosystem. But having all the players, the grassroots levels coming to represent their country is also, for them, their aspiration is always to sign for a professional team and be able to reach the salaries. Like in football, everybody wants to have the salary of Ronaldo or Messi. So it's same for esports. But this kind of competitions helps a lot to bring the people from there to the professional scene. The problem that occurs is 99% fail in that. And that's a huge number of esports athletes and huge number of people that are actually in this pool of players that are never gonna make $1, $2, $3, $5 million from esports, and they're competing, they're practicing on the same level. Some of them don't have the talent, some of them don't have the resources to do it. So that's the little, let's say, on the no side, on the con side. But on the pro side, it's a huge motivation for the people. And of course, all the pro players are giving good examples with, I don't know, fit, healthy lifestyle, being responsible for the gaming. So it has its pros, it has its cons, but it surely definitely needs to be somehow overlooked and, you know, paid close attention that it doesn't go over the top.
Yeah, and I think it's a good time to bring in Josh. Everybody loves an agent, okay? We love dealing with them, but Josh has reassured me he's one of the good guys in the space, so we'll see. But like, Josh, you know, in your role, you've been a team owner, okay? You've had to deal, you know, with the salaries of players, the negotiation of it, and now you're on the other side of the fence. I mean, taking that kind of, you know, holistic view, I mean, what have you learned? What can be done better, and, you know, how can we move beyond this kind of that it's not a conversation topic next year?
I think in terms of financial sustainability, unless you were living under a rock since 2022, I think esports has been in a quite rough position. You know, investor confidence fell, and even securing investment was quite tough for a lot of teams in 2022, 2023. You saw teams like Kawana, E United, Rix, CLG, my own, unfortunately, that crumbled and couldn't find investment. And you only had to look at share prices, you know, in 2022 to see many teams struggling. Astralis, parent companies, Overactive Media, Enthusiast Gaming, etc. I think in order to reach a point of sustainability, especially for the players, I think financial literacy is really important to teach the players and the teams. Thankfully, most agents, you know, even when I was a team owner and not an agent, I was always a strong advocate that players or managers and coaches, they'd all find an agent that had their best interests at heart. So of course we can help them with that financial literacy element. For teams, I'd say it's more working with, if it's corporate service providers or just having a subject matter expert to lead those negotiations. I've seen several times where players are lowballed and taken advantage of, or on the flip side, teams are paying extortionate amounts of money when they really don't need to, because they might be walking blind into a new esport. Diversification of revenue, I think, is a massive part to play. Teams, in order to sustain these contracts, they could look at ways to diversify their revenue streams. So I've seen some really innovative ways in the last 18 months. Teams have launched mobile app, like fan applications. There's virtual reality stadiums. There's white label IP events, exclusive merch drops. You know, the list goes on. There's lots of things that teams could be doing differently. For players, investing in themselves is something that we advise quite heavily as agents. So building upon brand development. You might be a really great professional player, but you're only worth so much to a team. So to build your value, maybe look at content creation or streaming and develop yourself into, you know, a more valuable asset. So there's ways to strengthen negotiations and build value on both sides. And I think that's a few ways in which you'd be better able to sustain those contracts.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting, because if you remember Anna's opening comment, we're talking about, you know, salaries as a way to a race to the top, to bypass some of this, you know, and you're taking a more long-term approach, you know, building out merch drops, but, you know, sometimes those two don't align necessarily. And Joe, I'm going to get you in 1 second, I know, but I'm going to come back to Anna here. And what I want to talk about, like, is, you know, while we're on that journey, like, is salary caps a way to kind of manage this at the moment? We've seen how it works in other sports, particularly the MLS, US sports, and how they manage that. We had a good chat during the week about what Wright's implementing. Is that a way for us to be able to kind of control this at the moment?
I think this is a great segue for, you know, then subsequently bringing Josh on board here. Salary caps, I think the biggest challenge of establishing a salary cap, while everybody probably agrees that it would, you know, bring financial health to, you know, the ecosystems, from a legal perspective, it's very complicated and almost impossible, because the word you don't want to hear is collusion between tournament organizers and teams, or, you know, whoever sets the framework, to the disadvantage of the players, because essentially what a salary cap does is limiting a player's potential of earning, which might have been limitless beforehand. So, you know, looking at recent developments, we do know constructs, Trev, from traditional sports when it comes to sustainability frameworks, you know, financial fair play. You know, recently the SFR approach by Riot has been released. I personally believe it's a great way of providing a framework for every industry participant to, while, you know, providing competitive salaries to your players, to stick to a certain baseline and be disincentivized, you know, of just going off base and paying too much just because you can. And personally, I believe this is where, you know, overall the industry should be headed, in terms of, like, not limiting the agency of teams and players to conclude whatever contract they may want to, but, you know, whereas you can disincentivize in a measured appropriate way, you should do it just for the sake of sustainability.
And Joe, I kind of saw you nodding a lot there, an awful lot actually. I was worried you might fall off the chair, but just to build on that, I mean, like, how can everybody then work together, the players, the agents, the teams, to kind of, create these contracts that are not, illegal, I guess, for want of a better word, stand up, hold up, but do provide a framework. And, what are the current challenges maybe you're seeing then from the contract side of things?
Well, I don't think teams and players' interests are as misaligned as people might think as part of a negotiation like this. There's a symbiosis and a you win, I win scenario for a lot of teams. We've spoken a lot about establishing a sustainable business model when it comes to esports. And I think some of Josh's examples here are talking about, yes, it can be a base salary, but there can also be a number of different revenue streams that build into that. And they're, again, win-win scenarios for both esports players and esports teams, whereby if revenue is generated and shared through a certain pre-arranged clear metric, everyone can be a winner. The thing I always say to either esports teams or players is the contract is there to work for both sides, and I think there's a way of doing that. I just think people need to get more creative, as we've heard.
I'd love to chip in on that answer as well. I think that contract, as agents, we're there to act as kind of intermediaries, bring each party's best interests to the table and make sure it's as much of a win-win as possible. We want the teams for it to be a sustainable agreement, but for the players, we want them to be compensated as best as possible. And I think there's ways in which, as Joe alluded to, you can structure in performance-based bonuses where their base salary might not be as high, but subject to reaching certain goals within that league or competition, you get paid a lump sum. And of course, that can offset the cost for teams because there's not as much of an upfront cost, and they can then use prize winnings that they might earn later on in the season or tournament to pay for those performance-based bonuses. I also think that teams should be implementing better early release conditions in contracts. Potentially teams that can't afford to keep players throughout off-season periods where there's no competition, there's no revenue. That's probably more applicable to smaller teams that can't sustain their player contracts throughout those off periods of play. And even buyout clauses. You look at, again, I'm using League of Legends as an example because that's my game through and through. But you look at Team Vitality where they have a 17-year-old jungler who's just been promoted to their main roster in LEC called Douglas. He's been with them since 2022. We'll be leaving them in 2024, which is a great investment. Carmine Corp want to renew their contract with their 17-year-old AD carry for 3 years till 2026. So that long-term investment will be a way for teams to hopefully recoup some of what they've spent and invest in their players.
Yeah, really interesting. And I suppose, Boban, to bring you back into it there, I mean, you're at a governing body level, and look, IESF does some great work, but in many ways it's very hard to, your hands are tied when it comes to the publishers and the mainstream titles, but I guess you're putting in some rules and regulations at that grassroots level. And is there any takeaway there that you think that the top tier esports can kind of learn from those rules and regulations you're putting in place, or is it very much we're here, they're there?
It's completely parallel, let's call it ecosystem. But of course, we learn a lot from the top tier teams and everything, and we've learned a lot from them. But it also needs to work both ways, because let me give you an example, that now esports is an official sport in 63 countries in the world, recognized by their ministries or Olympic committees, which gives a lot of credibility to the organization and to the competition. So when someone from those countries returns home with a gold medal, he's a national champion. And he gets benefits, he gets health, he gets retirement funds, he gets money, he gets support from the government. Now, the Asian Games that happened in China, it was an Olympic medal. So all the winners in esports are Olympic medalists in their countries. So again, there is a huge benefit to it, because what's important, they're all playing, but we know the lifespan of an athlete is short. What after that? Yeah, they can all be programmers, talents, streamers, casters, and analysts, do other kind of jobs in esports, but not all of them are successful in doing it and having enough to continue their career or their life. Not only the top 1% succeed. So this is something that the grassroots levels and the competing for your country in this system helps. So I believe that also what should happen in the professional scenes is besides the salaries that everybody is getting, and we know that the largest salaries goes to the most successful players and the best teams, that there also should be a follow-up for the athletes so that they know that the team they compete for is actually taking care of them. It's not using them just for you come play, win, or you lose. If you lose, you go home. And this happens more often than we can all see. You know, we all see only the shiny things that are happening. But there are a lot of athletes that have been discarded for a team for a bad week, for a bad month, or I don't know, for a bad period in time. That doesn't happen so often in other sports. So slowly this, hopefully, with our help also, this can also transfer to the professional ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, we do see teams discarding players, you know, when things don't go wrong. And I guess that's, you know, Josh, that's probably a lot of, you know, what you have to manage as well on that. You know, I mean, your job, I know you want to be the broker between the team and the player, but your ultimate job is to protect the player. And, like, as part of that role, I mean, do you find that you have to kind of educate the players on, you know, financial responsibility? Does that come into it a lot, or maybe it's probably on the team side as well?
Yeah, I think there's a shared responsibility there between agencies, the teams, the players play for that education piece. I think the education should stretch far further than just financial advice. I think it should look at longer-term career strategy and career planning. You know, a lot of professional players, they might only last 5 years, 7 years as a player. What happens at the end of that journey? Do they become a content creator? Do they become a coach? Do they become an advisor or a director or an executive somewhere else? And I think playing a part in that development and gearing them up and preparing them for that eventuality is something that we can play a part in. So yeah, it's a shared responsibility from teams and from the agents themselves.
Anna, anything to add on that?
Absolutely. I think, I mean, you will still see, you know, irresponsible spending across, you know, players at the moment. I think it's quite comparable to anyone who makes a lot of money for the first time in their lives. They might go out and, you know, and a couple of years ago it was the Balenciaga shoes and whatnot. And obviously, I do think it is quite important to support all these, you know, incredibly talented individuals at growing up and acting responsibly, also being a role model themselves. I mean, one topic I wanted to dive a bit deeper into what you said earlier, Josh, I thought it was quite interesting, where it was like, you know, in terms of salary structure, it needs to make sense that you can form a joint goal here in terms of like, why are you actually earning certain parts of your salary? And I can only subscribe to that. I think you know, one area where I'm quite passionate about is players taking part into revenue share from digital sales, whether this is, you know, team IP or overall IP. The reason why you as a team get revenue is because you participate in an ecosystem and you as a team invest. I personally believe players, if they partake in this type of revenue stream, should actually be compensated in accordance to what they bring to the table, which is their marketing power. You will have these star players who've transcended esports, who will sell lots and lots of skins for you, and you know, consequentially, they should get the equal share for marketing. But at the same time, you might also have, you know, rookie players who are then represented, and this shows, yeah, it's just standard that you get this percentage. And I'd always say it's like, yeah, but you know, it doesn't make sense. Hence, you know, for now, there should be no contribution. Same, by the way, for prize money. I do believe all kinds of bonuses are better allocated in a reward system where you can actually put sense towards why somebody you know, has earned this particular bonus.
I think it's actually a really interesting point, but I think, is that not something that can really upset the dynamics then of a team? You know, you think when you look at your top tier esports, your CSGO, your League, your Dota, Rocket League, you know, these are team esports. And one thing I've learned, particularly with dealing with players, they're very good at keeping secrets. Nobody knows what they get or what splits. So I actually see more of a challenge with that than anything else, because I think you can kind of create this kind of imbalance within the team where somebody's getting more, or maybe you and Josh have a way to solve that, have you?
Well, I'd love to think of many solutions. I think, believe it or not, players speak a lot to each other. They speak amongst each other, hence why, one player on a team, let's say it's a transfer season, one player gets offered €5,000 a month, and his teammate was previously being offered 2,000 a month. They have a short conversation. All of a sudden, this person's coming back and saying, well, I want 4,500 a month. And there's no real reasoning behind that because they won't tell you they've had a conversation behind closed doors. So I 100% get what you mean.
However, I will say, of course, we always know, on the back end, what's actually going on. It's always like a guy X has talked and now it's spread. But again, I think this is also a responsibility on the teams, and I know it's a bit unpopular, but to stay strong, because I think there are certain parts of your contract and of the revenue structure where you can't compromise because you might lose a player if you deviate too much from what's expected as a standard. But then I've also found if you have a good conversation, and respectful, common sense conversation, you usually can come up with a much better model over the years with the player and really establish a trusting relationship that results in a lot of competitive success as well. Because the worst thing that can happen to you is that a player feels like kind of screwed over, not trusting the organization, and then they're just, a part of their head is occupied with like, this is not a good place for me to perform at.
I think player salary inflation is a thing. I think we understand that. That's the reason why we're having this discussion. But I'd say the majority of players, at least the ones we represent, they want to play at the highest level possible with the highest quality teammates possible, and it's not primarily about the paycheck. I think those who do chase the paycheck in esports are anomalies, and unfortunately they raise the bar when people hear words, through Discord or Twitter DMs or leak journalist reports and stuff. It's unfortunately the anomalies that are causing the salary push. But for the majority of players, they just want to be on the biggest stage in front of to get the best opportunities possible for themselves. So I don't think it's all money driven and everyone isn't out there to get the best salary possible. It's just a few bad apples in the barrel, unfortunately.
Spoken like a true agent. I suppose, look, before we go on to the next question, and this is for everybody across, what is the perfect split between org and players on prize pools? Start with you, Joe. Give me a number.
I really don't think there is a right answer. I think if the last question's drawn out anything, it's about agreeing a pool split that's transparent and that keeps everyone on the right
I want
side.
a number, Joe.
I'm not going to give it to you, Trev. I'm not putting my neck on the line.
Well, I'm going to be controversial here, but you have to allow me to give some reasoning, okay? So I'll say the price split should be 0% players, 100% organization, just because it should rather be that players and organizations sit down and discuss bonuses in the context of performance achievements. Obviously, paying you zero prize money doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not going to pay you, possibly hundreds of thousands for, ending up the best team in the West in the League of Legends World Championship, because that has true commercial value for the organization. But at the same time, when it comes to prize money, I feel it creates, such a distraction when it comes to compensation. It's also from an administrative point of view, or is this, you get the money from the organizer, then you need to distribute further. If you've established an overall price cut between org and player, and you might want to change this over time, it's impossible because you've set, the split at the very beginning, so you can't deviate from it just for one player, because then they talk to each other and everybody's going to be sad or angry or whatever. So I think, let's uncomplicate things. Highly unpopular, impossible to establish if not all, would buy into this model. But from an intellectual point of view, I believe, it has something going for it.
100%.
I'll give you two very quick answers. One is the reality and the other is my opinion.
Okay.
I think my opinion would be up to a certain threshold, the org should take 100% of the revenue. Maybe once you start creeping above 500k, a million, you look at Dota TI, the prize pool is phenomenal. I think only then, the tables start to turn and a percentage starts to be returned to the player, in addition to being able to discuss bonuses, additional bonuses, because for the players to, win that for the team, I think they should earn a portion if it's a sizable amount. the reality is that very small teams in League of Legends and maybe some other esports as well, to attract the players that initially they need to offer up to 80, 90%, sometimes all of the prize winnings, because they can't offer competitive enough salaries, so they have to compensate with the prize winnings on top of that.
Okay. Yep. Boban?
Well, I'm on the completely opposite side. 100% should go to the players. It's called a prize fund, right? It's not a participation fund for the organization, so they're competing for it. Now, this should be taken deeply into consideration when you negotiate salaries. That I agree. But definitely that's a prize fund that motivates the players to win. Organizations, teams, companies, they have marketing team, they have sales department, they have millions of ways to get funds to keep the organization running and to keep it funded and operational and get practice, coaching, and boot camps and everything that is required for a professional team. But as long as prize fund is a key element of every competition that we do, and it's a sales pitch for everybody who organizes a tournament, 1 million, 2 million, 40 million, 60 million, those money should go to the athletes. This is also something that we as ISF do. Whenever there is a prize fund, it goes to the athletes directly. Nothing is for the federation. It's only for the athletes because it's their right. It's like a medal for them. So this is what I believe, and this is what ISF believes also.
You need to start paying out CSGO salaries on a monthly basis, Boban, and then you'll see. I mean, personally, I'd sit on the kind of 75% to an org, 25% into a player pool that's shared. But, Joe, I mean, we've only got 5 minutes left, so we'll finish with you in a question, then we'll get an opinion from everybody. But, Joe, when you look at it, like, you've got tournament organizers, you've got teams, you've got the publishers, who should be, setting the standards here on player compensation? Should orgs be working together? Should there be, we won't go back to salary caps on it, but should there be some, operating thresholds that teams have to be within to enter into a tournament, or should the publishers just put their foot down and say, hey, this is what we want to see and do?
I think Anna touched on it earlier on, and whenever you make a decision to take agency away from teams and players, it has to be done so with very good reason. I think over the past year, 2 years, particularly with the esports winter being here, market forces are kind of dictating some of this anyway. Salaries might be coming down a little bit. There might be more sort of rationale applied to how salaries, bonus structures, revenue shares are calculated. I don't quite think we're at the stage of taking that agency away from teams and players. It could come, but again, you're then faced with the difficult question of who's enforcing that? What are the repercussions if teams aren't abiding by it? And that creates, again, a messy situation that fundamentally detracts from the main attraction, which is watching the esports.
Okay. Well, great. That was some really, really brilliant insight. So I guess, look, just to finish up, we didn't solve the problem of player salaries. We didn't solve the problem of prize pools. So if we can give anybody in the audience something to take away, what innovative approach can teams do to make sure they've got enough money in the door to pay these players?
Well, coming from what we do as a federation, I can say that there are all the sponsors and we see new brands coming into esports, but I would definitely recommend looking into governments, cities, municipalities, maybe even a brighter, communities that exist, like the European Union or, BRICS or whatever else exists, G8, G7. Because here, why not have, London Knights as a team? And the city pays for the team, right? And it can create an entire ecosystem of practice, planning, everything. You can have, Stockholm Sharks, or any city can have a club. Any country can decide to sponsor as a government on local in 5-6 cities clubs. And those are funds that we know are a small portion for a government or for a city to invest in esports as they are doing in other sports. Now, not every country can be good at cricket or at basketball, but they can focus their funds into something that will at least help them go on international level and showcase their athletes how good they are and how much they can achieve actually in esports. So those are two fields that I see are not being touched, not to mention exhausted, or what the potential is there. And this is coming from experience because this is how we operate. When we use a host city, the government, they are the ones actually financing the entire World Championship in order to bring players, athletes, tourism, cooperation, networking, and develop like opportunities for employment for much more for everybody. So this is something that I would like to, leave here on the table.
If it's for teams better lining their pockets, I'd repeat what I said earlier about diversifying revenue. From experience trying to do a significant raise industry, most of the investors are asking, all right, what's your asset list? What do you own that's proprietary? So my advice would be proprietary technology, develop software, data products. I think that's worth a lot. And also white label IP. So that could be events. It could be, I take Methods Race to World First as a great kind of white label event. Proprietary technology could be TSM and what they do with Blitz, the Blitz app. So yeah, those are my recommendations. Just develop and diversify.
I think on the one hand, it's important that we still establish a baseline of responsible spending. I think, again, Riot's SFR is a great step into the right direction. At the same time, it's really all on the teams in particular to commercialize successfully. And whether this is, developing a unique talent funnel and commercialize that, or whether this is, proprietary IP or having a unique partnership approach. But it's really on the teams to have this sustainable, real business that hopefully is close to breaking even and making money, because anything else is not going to survive what we call esports winter.
My one takeaway is flexibility. I just think if we've covered anything today, it's ensure there's flexibility with your player contracts, allowing them the flexibility to generate revenue within that team environment, to move to another team if the situation becomes unsustainable, and also flexibility around revenue generation. Be creative, look at different avenues, explore different IP, explore different ways of reaching your target audience.
That's all for today. So thanks, Boban, thanks, Josh, thanks, Anna, and thanks, Joe.
Thank you.